Hello, Mr. Montalvo here, and today we are taking a look at Unit 4, Lesson 1, Day 3, focusing on the advancements in weaponry during the war. Our objective for today is to examine the effects of the changes in military technologies used during World War I, including trench warfare, chemical weapons, machine guns, and aircraft. Now, taking a look back at the previous lesson yesterday, try to think about the effect that World War I had on the economy, the American economy. Was it positive? Was it negative? Now, in order to better understand the content for today, it's important for us to understand one of the key terms in this topic, that is armistice. Armistice being an agreement to stop fighting. Millions died needlessly because military and civilian leaders were slow to adapt strategies and tactics to new weaponry. The most significant technological advance was the improvement of the machine gun. The Germans recognized the potential and developed air-cooled machine guns for airplanes and improved those used on the ground, making them lighter and easier to move. Due to the advances in weaponry, both sides dug in, creating a maze of trenches protected by mines and barbed wire. Soldiers spent weeks in the muddy, rat-infested holes in the ground. When attacks were ordered, soldiers went over the top, literally climbing out of the trenches, and ventured into an area that would become known as no man's land, the area between either side's trenches, in order to reach the enemy. Now here we have an example of a typical trench, now dug anywhere between 4 to 5 feet, depending on the height of a particular soldier. Some of these were a lot more intricate, with bathrooms, running water, and bunkers or shelters for soldiers, because they were spending quite a bit of time. Now, chemical warfare first appeared when Germans used poison gas. Now, all sides would use poison gas frequently by 1918. It was just released from large cylinders and carried by the wind into nearby enemy lines and into those trenches. The Germans used this weapon the most, realizing that enemy soldiers wearing gas masks did not fight as well. It was frightening, the development that caused victims to deal with suffering, if not death, and in some cases, long-term injuries. Now, chemical warfare took many forms. One of the most common was tear gas, and while tear gas was not lethal, was not deadly, it did irritate soldiers enough to distract them and then eventually be taken by other means. Mustard gas and chlorine gas were the two of the other most common gases, which did lead to fatalities. Airplanes were used to observe enemy troops. As their effectiveness became apparent, both sides shot planes down with artillery from the ground and from other planes. Germany was the first to employ submarines or U-boats in warfare. In order to locate and sink German U-boats, British scientists developed underwater listening devices and underwater explosives called depth chargers. Warships became faster and more powerful than ever before and used the newly invented radios to communicate more effectively. Most of the American combat in World War I took place in France. The US Army played a significant role in the last years of the war. The first American troops reached France in June of 1917. Now, the Allies had lost millions of soldiers. Troops in the trenches were exhausted and ill, and many civilians in Britain and France were near starvation. And we also have to remember that due to the issues in Russia, Russia pulled themselves out of the Allied forces. So the Americans came in just in time. General John Pershing commanded the American army. Among the first African American troops to fight with the French army was the 369th United States Infantry. This African American segregated unit became known as the Harlem Hellfighters. And although the United States allowed few African Americans to train for combat, the French, however, respected the bravery of African American soldiers and were glad to fight side by side with them. 1918, American troops plunged into the first major engagement of the war, the Battle of Belleau Wood. In September, German soldiers told the Kaiser, the German emperor, that the war could not be won. President Wilson set up two conditions for armistice, for an end to the fighting. First, Germany they had to accept his plan for peace. And second, the German emperor must advocate, that is, give up their power. On November 9th, the German emperor was forced to resign, and Germany became a republic. Between 8 to 9 million people died in the battles of the war. Now, as an extension to this lesson, to today's lesson, I'm going to connect a close reading, a primary source analysis, speech delivered by President Woodrow Wilson entitled "A World Safe for Democracy." And to close, try to think to yourself and explain the effects of the advancements in technology that took place during World War I. Take a look and think about the effects on the individual soldiers, the individual people involved. And that's all for today. Thank you so much.